welcome to the last session of the day. Glad you could join us for the session about abuse, neglect, and exploitation, the life of an elder abuse case. I had the privilege of attending a similar training to this with Kimberly Henderson pre-COVID, and I'm excited to hear from her again. I certainly learned a lot when I went to her training. So Kimberly Henderson is joining us today along with Michaelyn Castelow and Heather Jones, and I will let Kimberly introduce her two panelists once we get started here. Kimberly Henderson is the Elder Abuse Project Coordinator for the Mid-Florida Area Agency on Aging, which is also known as Elder Options. In her role at Elder Options, she is committed to protecting our vulnerable senior population from elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Elder Options covers 16 counties in Florida, and Kimberly specifically manages an office on violence against women and abuse in later life grant project, which covers Alachua, Bradford, and Union counties. We will take questions at the end, and the PowerPoint and materials are already uploaded on the FeedLoop platform under this session. So welcome, Kimberly and Michaelyn, and thank you for being with us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to present for the Elder Justice Conference. Again, my name is Kimberly Henderson, and I'm the Elder Abuse Project Coordinator with Elder Options. If you could please make sure that your microphone is muted when you're not speaking. It sounds like we're getting a little bit of feedback. Today's presentation is titled Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation, Life of an Elder Abuse Case. And we're going to look at a couple of different elder abuse case scenarios and talk about what the prosecution, law enforcement, and APS involvement might be in those cases, and then also look at some resources available to seniors who have been victims of abuse. So our hope in doing presentations like this is to bring more awareness to the issue of elder abuse, kind of to shed some light on this issue, not only for seniors, but also for professionals who may be working with seniors who are being abused. So again, I'm Kimberly Henderson. I work with Elder Options. In my role at Elder Options, I manage two grant projects. One is a federal grant through the Office on Violence Against Women, which Christy had mentioned earlier during the introduction. But we offer direct services in 3 of our counties, Alachua, Bradford, and Union counties, to victims of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And then I also manage a statewide grant that covers outreach and professional training throughout our 16 county area. So on the meeting today, we have Michaelyn Castelow.
Still have no audio. I can't hear it. Let's see here. Now I can reconnect too, but are they speaking? I don't even know if have they started? Okay.
Yes, we have audio on our end. Let me see if I can fix it on the closed captioning end. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Christy, just let me know when you're ready for me to resume.
Okay, go ahead and I'll see what I can fix on that end. Thank you.
Okay. So joining us today on our panel, we have Michaelyn Castelow, and she's the program administrator for Circuits 3 and 8. That's in the Northeast region of Florida for Department of Children and Families, Adult Protective Services. Michaelyn, could you please maybe share a little bit about your position and what your role is at APS?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. As Kimberly said, my name is Michaelyn Castelow, and I am the program administrator for Circuits 3 and 8 in the Northeast region, and my specific area covers 13 counties. I have 2 investigative units and 2 services units. I basically manage the supervisors and the field staff that go out on investigations for abuse, neglect, exploitation, and self-neglect.
All right, thank you. We also have Ms. Heather Jones. She's the Chief Assistant State Attorney with the State Attorney's Office. Heather, welcome. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your role?
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Heather Jones. I am the Chief Assistant State Attorney here in the 8th Judicial Circuit that's in Gainesville area. We have 6 counties: Alachua, Baker, Bradford, Union, Gilchrist, and Levy. I supervise all of the attorneys and support staff here at the State Attorney's Office, and I'm also the partner that I think Kimberly is going to talk a little bit more about, but a local grant that we have here, and I'm the assigned prosecutor to help Kimberly and the other members of our group do trainings around the circuit.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So one of the things I want to make sure and point out today, and I think the most important takeaway from our training, is that elder abuse is incredibly underreported. So this slide was put out by Lifespan of Greater Rochester. And for every one elder abuse case that comes to the attention of APS, law enforcement, Aging Services Network, there are 23 other cases or situations that are never brought to light, that are never offered services. And so that's a lot of missed opportunities for providing an intervention for those seniors who are experiencing abuse. And that's really concerning. I know for me in my role as a elder abuse project coordinator. And so one of the reasons we do presentations like this is to bring more awareness and encourage people to report. And, you know, if you see something, say something. So we definitely hope that your biggest takeaway today will be that you will feel comfortable and know how to report elder abuse if you suspect it's occurring. So why does elder abuse go unreported? So this is true, I think, in many forms of abuse. It's true also in domestic violence, but victims of abuse may experience shame. They may be embarrassed. They may not want to admit to their family members or friends that they've been abused or they've been exploited. They may experience fear about what's going to happen to them if the abuse is reported, and then also fear about what's going to happen to the perpetrator, because many times the perpetrator is somebody that's living in the home. It could be a caregiver, it could be a family member, and if that person gets in trouble for perpetrating abuse, the victim may be concerned about, you know, what's going to happen to them, who's going to help take care of them if this person who has been performing caregiving duties, but also perpetrating abuse, is now removed from the home due to the elder abuse. There's also uncertainty about what constitutes elder abuse and whether or not that report of elder abuse would be taken seriously by the authorities. You know, many individuals, older adults, who maybe their perpetrator is their spouse and they have throughout their marriage experienced some domestic violence. You know, those types of scenarios don't just stop as we age. So that domestic violence could continue into the aging years. And so, you know, if a survivor has become accustomed to that type of abuse throughout their relationship, you know, they may not realize that this is wrong, that it's okay to speak up and ask for help, and try to have a safer way to live, a safer place to be than in that situation. So there are many different types of elder abuse. So physical abuse, we always think of anything, you know, broken bones, injuries to the body, untreated medical wounds, things that are physical you can see on the body. You know, when someone is being pushed, kicked, punched, any of those types of things would fall under physical abuse. We also have emotional and psychological abuse. So that can be name calling, it could be the silent treatment. A really powerful tool of abusers that falls under the emotional and psychological abuse category would be isolation. And this is especially true right now during this pandemic with COVID-19, because a lot of seniors have been isolated at home with their abusers. And so that has increased the potential for the abuse that was already occurring, or maybe increased potential for abuse to begin occurring just because of the stress associated with the pandemic and the fact that everyone was staying home so that they could be safe from COVID. There are also sexual abuse would be any sort of over the clothing or under the clothing type of contact. We also see neglect. So that would be whenever a senior's needs are not being met, their need for clothing, food, housing, adequate medical care. And then also financial abuse. So any type of financial exploitation. There are a lot of scams going around right now. But anything to do with their finances and their assets. That could include someone trying to make them sign their will over to that individual that's acting as the perpetrator. So there's just lots of different ways that a senior can be financially exploited. I also want to make sure we bring up self-neglect, because self-neglect is when a senior or an older adult is engaging in neglect of themselves, when they're making a decision not to take care of their own medical needs and provide their food, housing, and adequate care. Now, a lot of times that could be because they're able to do that and take care of themselves, but they're choosing not to. But sometimes self-neglect can occur because a senior has reached a point, either through a medical condition or just through the natural aging process, where they need some extra assistance. And so there definitely are resources through Adult Protective Services and the local area agencies on aging, just like Elder Options, to provide additional assistance. So as you can see from the pie chart in this slide, neglect makes up the largest percentage of abuse cases that are reported. I believe the percentage is about 58% for this slide, followed by physical abuse, and then financial exploitation, then emotional abuse. Sexual abuse does occur. It makes up the portion that it makes up of this graph is so small that you really can't see it, but it does occur to older adults. So I have a video today that I want to share with everyone. This is a video that we actually use in our Department of Elder Affairs, Elder Abuse Prevention and Awareness Training. And it really does an excellent job of showing 3 different case scenarios of elder abuse. And after the video, we're going to kind of pick apart each scenario and kind of talk about what types of interventions could occur to help the senior that we're seeing in each of those scenarios.
Well, you can't. She's just not up to seeing visitors today or tomorrow. Well, it's just not possible. She's not seeing anybody, and she doesn't want to see anybody. No, not even you. You'll just have to wait until she feels better.
Ed, come here. I want that. Ed!
Now she's up again and calling me. I have to hang up. I'll call you soon when she feels better. Listen, Mom, you're just not in a position to have visitors right now. Maybe once you sign the documents, you'll feel better.
But I'm feeling fine.
Mom, we both know you'll feel better once you sign the house over to me. I just don't want you feeling overwhelmed with the burden of the house on your mind. All right. You might as well just go to your room then. Because we have nothing else to talk about until you sign. And you're not seeing any visitors until this is sorted out.
These things.
Here, let me do it. What's your PIN number?
1970, your birth year.
Hi, Gloria.
Oh, hi, dear. How are you doing?
It's not working. We'll try again tomorrow.
But Mom, you had money in your pocket.
Come on, I don't want to hear about money we don't have. Let's go.
Mary. I'm hungry. Are you on your way out to the store again?
Oh, hey guys.
Oh, Phil, you're back. How was school today?
Oh, there's no school today, Gramps. Just practice.
Okay, I am on my way out. Dad, you stay comfortable. I'll grab some food and bring it back later.
But Mary, I'm hungry now.
You'll be fine for a little bit, Dad. I'll hurry, okay? Can you get your grandpa a glass of water and take him back to his room? Here, Dad, make sure you take your pill today too, okay?
I thought I already did.
No, and you missed yesterday too, so just take a couple of extra. He'll be fine, he just needs a nap.
What'd you say?
Nothing, Dad. You make sure to have a lie down. Okay, I'll see you guys when I get back.
All right, come on, Gramps. Let's go. All right. Almost there, Gramps. Almost there. All right, and yeah, there you go. There you go, Gramps. Let's go.
Wait, you're not gonna just leave him like that, are you?
He'll be fine.
I don't know, man. That just doesn't seem right.
He'll be fine. My mom gave him something that's gonna help him sleep for a while. Come on, we're gonna be late for practice.
You know what? I just remembered. I gotta go home first and get my cleats. So I'll just meet you there, okay?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll see you there.
Okay.
So how do you guys feel about watching those situations in that video? What was your response to that? I think Christy is going to be monitoring the chat if you want to type in some of your responses.
Being shy. It's the second time I've seen that video, but it's really good. Just explaining the different types of abuse and how to report it. Okay, we had some responses in the Q&A box. Appalled, heartbreaking, agreed. Anybody else? Sickening. The positive thing was that people noticed, in all the scenarios, someone noticed, hey, this just doesn't seem right.
That's a great point, and that's something I like to always bring up when we talk about all three scenarios, is that the one common thread throughout the video is in each situation, someone either heard that the abuse was occurring or they saw it happening and they picked up their phone to make that call. And so I think if there's anything you take away from this video, it's that idea that bystander intervention is important and that it does make a difference. And so it kind of goes back to, if you see something, say something. So we'll talk a little bit more about reporting in the state of Florida after we go over the scenarios. But I want to kind of analyze a little bit each scenario and talk about what was happening. So in the first scenario, we have a mother and son at home, and just from the scenario, we can tell that the home actually belongs to the mother. However, the son is trying to get her to sign that over to him. So what types of victimization do you see occurring in that scenario? And you can just type those in the chat box.
Exploitation, financial neglect, financial and neglect, and forced isolation.
Yes, so definitely there's financial exploitation occurring because he's trying to take control of her assets. But there's also some psychological and emotional abuse occurring because he's yelling at her, he's verbally abusive with her. He's also isolating her. Whoever calls on the phone, he won't let her talk to them. We don't really know whether that's a friend or a family member, but whoever's on the phone, the mother clearly wants to talk to that person, but he's not letting her do that. He also threatens that, they're just going to stay home and not see anybody or talk to anyone until she signs the house over to him. So, definitely we see that financial exploitation and then also the psychological and emotional abuse. So I'm going to ask Michaelyn to join us and comment on this scenario and maybe share with us what the Adult Protective Services perspective would be on this situation if you received a report for this type of scenario.
Thank you, Kim. Everyone who provided a response was spot on in Adult Protective Services, and specifically with the Department of Children and Families. Reports are made to the hotline. The hotline counselors have what we call a maltreatment index, which basically lists all the possible abuse, maltreatments that they could code to a specific case. And when Kim first sent this video out and I watched it, I instantly started jotting down what I would expect to get on a report if a report came in, and or if it wasn't added by the hotline, what I would expect my supervisors or investigators to add to this report. And one of the first things that I added was mental injury. Mental injury is one of our maltreatments, and a part of the mental injury maltreatment, like a subcode to that, would be confinement and bizarre punishment. Now, what that would be that inappropriate and excessive isolation. It was clear from him coming into the room, you can tell that he was commanding whoever he was speaking to on the phone that he wasn't going to allow his mother to interact with that person directly. And of course, he made it very clear towards the end of the video that he wasn't going to allow her to have visitors. So I would expect the intake that we received to have a mental injury specific confinement code to it, as well as just a generic mental injury code, because he began to yell at her once she walked away from him. The other maltreatment that I would expect to see would be exploitation. Now, though we didn't get a whole lot from the video, so even the young man in the lawn, in his yard hearing this may not have a whole lot, but it's pretty clear that he's trying to force her to sign over her home, and could be trying to make her do a power of attorney. Who knows what other documents he had there. So that could be some potential exploitation that we would also investigate if we had this intake come in.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think you're right about that. It's likely in this scenario, and I certainly see this whenever I speak to families or victims who are experiencing exploitation. Many times, not only are they trying to sign the deed over to the perpetrator, but the perpetrator has also been listed in the will, may have already gotten a power of attorney, may have already taken over bank accounts. So there may be, multiple financial exploitations occurring. So I'd like to invite Heather to comment from the State Attorney's Office on what this scenario would look like if there were criminal charges filed, or if there could be a law enforcement response and prosecution in this situation.
Sure. One of the things that I will say that Florida is very blessed to have is some forward-thinking statutes, criminal statutes. We have a large aging population, and it shows in our legislative response to issues of exploitation, neglect, and abuse. I've done trainings. The National Center for Abuse in Later Life sent me on a training in Texas, and I was really surprised to see how many prosecutors' offices and law enforcement offices all over the country try to shoehorn issues of exploitation into traditional crimes, your petty thefts, and things like that, your grand thefts just for simply stealing, as opposed to us having just the wealth that we have as far as issues of exploitation, abuse, neglect. And so in that way, I think the law enforcement response on this one would be to start obviously with speaking to the young man about what he heard. He did hear some somewhat specific things as far as what was maybe happening in that home. But ultimately, the majority of this case would depend upon mom being willing to participate in the investigation with law enforcement and then eventually possibly the prosecution. And that is going to be really hard just for all of the reasons that Kimberly discussed earlier, which is he her main caregiver, and does she have any other options if he is no longer in the home, or if he is somehow prosecuted, if he can't have contact with her, if he were to go to prison. Number one, you just have the issues that are wrapped up in all domestic issues, where you don't want to see something bad happen to your son. You just want him to stop what he's doing. And so she has the guilt associated with that, and then whether or not he is caring for her. But I think the exploitation charges, the investigation for law enforcement would likely carry on to her other financial institutions, checking with her bank, checking to see if he's now on a bunch of accounts that maybe he wasn't on before. Is there a power of attorney? The other thing that we're very fortunate about in Florida is our power of attorney is not a license to steal. And so often we'll hear law enforcement and even prosecutors say, but he or she had a power of attorney. That doesn't matter. The power of attorney is still not permitted under Florida law to be used for the benefit of anyone other than the originator of the financial either accounts or whatever's happening. Everything that is happening with the use of a power of attorney should be being used for the benefit of the original individual. So assuming she were willing to work with us, I think this would be a strong case of exploitation, because she doesn't have to actually sign it. The statute is clear that just endeavoring to, using force or coercion in an attempt to get financial control over, in this case, her house, would be a criminal act.
Thank you so much, Heather, for sharing that. I noticed we did have a couple of new comments in the chat. Christy, were there any questions for this scenario?
Just some comments so far. Someone was just verifying that the POA cannot be used to benefit the holder of the right in the POA. We did have a question: would law enforcement tell her that she could get an elder abuse injunction and services with the agencies on aging until she could get a caregiver in place?
So I would hope so. I think that is dependent on the deputy or the officer that goes out to the home once the situation is reported. I know one of our initiatives with the Abuse and Later Life Grant, and also with our Elder Abuse Prevention Program, is to educate law enforcement about the different resources available. And one of those would be the civil legal remedies, like through Three Rivers Legal Services or your local legal service provider. For our area, for most of our area, it's Three Rivers Legal Services, and then Community Legal Services of Mid-Florida for the elder options area. So to answer that question, I would hope so. I would hope that they would offer that as a potential resource, and potentially give them, either elder options contact information or the legal services agency information as well. But that's definitely an option in this scenario.
We did have also piggyback on you real quick.
Yes, absolutely.
In addition to, of course, law enforcement being able to do that, if an investigator goes out on the case, and Heather brought up a lot of good points when you're dealing with family dynamics and things like that, how difficult it can be. But part of what we do, of course, is assess risk, and we also offer services. So if an investigator went out here and discussed this case with the mother, there are services that we could offer too, which could include suggesting that they do an exploitation injunction, suggest them maybe changing their bank account information, things like that, and putting them in contact with Elder Options or Elder Source, wherever they're located, to get those services to them. We would do that as well through APS.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's so important for us all to look at elder abuse through a multidisciplinary lens, so that we're looking at how we can all work together and all these systems can work together to benefit that older adult who's being abused. So I know in our area, we're working really hard to partner with APS, with law enforcement, with the state attorney's office, the local DV and SV centers, just to make sure we're kind of on the same page and we're all aware of what services are available and what we can each do whenever there's a situation where abuse is occurring. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the second scenario.
I did have one follow-up question, Kimberly, real quick. What if she is cognitively impaired?
So that is a question, I believe, for Michaelyn. So if she does not have capacity, what would the next steps be?
So if she didn't have capacity, and in speaking with the son, if the son in the home is the primary caregiver, we would be trying to see if there's other family who would be willing to step in place to provide her assistance. But what we might have to do is, because of course we try to do the least restrictive with APS. But if it didn't work out where there was someone else, then we would likely have to do a court order or do protective supervision, is what we call it, to go to court to get a court order to assist her with her financial needs. If it was a matter of her not being able to stay in the home, we could also assist with placement. But if she was able to at least stay in the home with an additional, an alternative caregiver, things like that, we would do that.
All right, thank you very much. And I think also all of the local area agencies on aging across the state of Florida can assist with the Medicare long-term care waiver. So if the individual, maybe if it was time for them to receive some facility care, we would also work with APS and through Medicaid to hopefully get them on the waiting list and start that process if there wasn't a family member available to take them in at that time. So, all right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next scenario. So in the second scenario, we have a mother and daughter at the ATM. The granddaughter is there. And then while they're accessing the ATM, it seems like a friend who knows the grandmother walks in and starts talking to her. And so she's the one that witnesses the incident occurring and perhaps is the one who would call that in to the hotline. So what victimization do you see occurring in this scenario?
Just a reminder, everyone, you can type those responses right into the chat box.
I forgot to give a reminder. Thank you, Christy.
Okay, someone saw financial exploitation. My favorite part was how the kid said, "But mom, you put the money in your pocket."
Yes.
Out of the mouths of babes.
I know, and thank goodness kids are always so honest and they will tell you like it is.
They sure will.
I love that part of the video too, because I think that's, not only is the daughter who's taking the money from the ATM and acting like the ATM machine is broken to her mother, but she's also setting a terrible example for her daughter who's watching all of this play out. So, I think in this scenario, we really only are seeing financial exploitation occurring. In my previous work as a victim advocate, it was my experience that when exploitation was occurring, there probably were other things occurring too. And we don't really have enough information from this one scenario to know kind of what their living arrangements are or if there are other things occurring. I do want to note that the daughter drove them to the ATM, so I don't know if that means the mother was no longer driving anymore, but we definitely, have very clear financial exploitation here. I think it's also concerning that the mother gave the daughter the PIN number, so now the daughter, already had the debit card and the PIN number. So that worries me a little bit for the future, because now the daughter could just go back to the ATM and take more money without the mother even knowing. So definitely some concerns. Michaelyn, would you like to share kind of how APS would handle this type of call?
Yes, so it is clear in cut exploitation. And as Heather mentioned earlier, when she was discussing our statutes and things like that, that it can be either for our purposes, it's a person who either stands in a position of trust and confidence, or someone who knows or should know that an individual lacks the capacity to consent. And we work out of, basically, they can use deception or intimidation to obtain that information. Like I said, they may not always get it, but even that attempt can be considered exploitation as far as APS is concerned. When we get this case, we definitely would speak with the mother, the daughter, and hopefully someone would speak with the young child to get that additional information, because the young child probably has some additional information about what's going on in the home. If the friend at the ATM was the reporter potentially and saw this information, hopefully maybe they're aware of some other things as well that could be going on. When we get this information, we would take our report and notify law enforcement and the state's attorney's office. And then at that point, law enforcement would take it on and investigate it and forward it over to the state's attorneys as well if they had unreasonable cause. Now, I will say this, in my experience, and this isn't one size fits all or everyone's, the same, but I think Heather mentioned, and I was actually glad to hear it come from Heather. Sometimes people don't have that understanding. And I've personally been told by law enforcement, well, they had the card and they got the PIN number. Okay, that may have been that one instance and occasion, because we do it. That doesn't mean that was open reign to go and take mom's money or dad's money whenever they felt like it. So we just kind of impress upon them our standpoint as APS and make the law enforcement referral and hope that it can go somewhere from there.
And I think that's true very much for not only the ATM card, but also if someone has a power of attorney, like Heather had mentioned, that, this is a power of attorney or a bank account or an ATM card that's for the benefit of that older adult, and not just, free range for the individual that has possession of it at that time to do whatever they want to. So I think that's a great point.
Yes, we had several comments about that. But Michaelyn said it appears that the daughter intends to come back tomorrow and do it again and again and again. And then someone else commented, it seems as though our banking industry would be well served by education on these matters. They see this often, but don't really seem to know what to do.
And I think some banks are starting to kind of evolve and have more awareness about this type of issue. I know at Elder Options, we try to reach out to the banking industry to talk to them about financial exploitations and some of the risk factors and warning signs, especially if you have someone that's been banking with your bank for 3 decades. And so you kind of have a good idea of what their normal banking patterns are. And then all of a sudden, if the bank account is changed to a different bank, or there are large transactions coming out, or every day someone's bringing that older adult in to withdraw cash. I mean, these would be kind of indicators that something's going on that's different than what's been going on throughout the life of that account. So we do try to do some outreach, but I think it's true with any industry is that we always need more outreach. And so we all need to do our due diligence to educate on this issue and attend webinars and conferences to learn more about it, so that we can take that back to our jobs and hopefully keep more seniors safe. Heather, would you like to share the prosecution standpoint on this situation?
Sure. This one, and of course, I agree with everyone, we have some clear-cut exploitation. We also have just traditional theft. And this one, we really don't need to bother mom as much as I feel like we would in the first scenario, where mom would really be an important witness. In this case, the mother is likely to say to us that which we can see she saw, which is, No, it wasn't working. My daughter didn't take anything. The ATM wasn't working. You must be mistaken, because all of the other evidence we have is going to be pretty clear from a law enforcement perspective and then from a prosecution perspective as to this theft or exploitation. The bank records will be clear. The video on the ATM will be very clear. The caller is likely to be the friend who also noticed and heard the daughter. So we probably wouldn't have to put the daughter in a situation. We would want to avoid putting the granddaughter, I suppose, in a situation to testify against her mom. We would avoid that. But in this particular case, the actual investigation for law enforcement could be quite simple with just a few subpoenas for certain records and for video, and the prosecution of the theft itself as well would be quite simple. And again, the question becomes, where does that really get us? She's driving mom. What sort of punishment do we want from her? What we really want is for her to not steal from her mother anymore. What we don't necessarily want to do is put her in jail or prison so that she's not available to help mom or care for her child. So this one would be an easy prosecution case, but a difficult result in how do we want to react. Is it just that we want to get daughter some sort of help, some sort of education, something, I don't know what their situation is, but obviously stealing from her mother is not the answer.
Absolutely. And I also want to point out, in situations where there's financial exploitation occurring, we do have a new exploitation injunction that is obtained through civil court that will kind of freeze the assets so that the judge and the parties involved can kind of look at what's going on. I am not an attorney, so I'm probably not doing a really good job of explaining this injunction, but it's something that the North Central Florida Senior Advocacy Network, many of the attorneys, including Shannon Miller on that team, work to kind of get that pushed through the legislature to help protect older adults, especially when there's financial exploitation occurring. So that would be an option too. All right, any comments or questions in the chat for scenario 2 before we move on?
Someone made a great observation, which I didn't catch at all. The mother was unfamiliar with the ATM, so a large ATM withdrawal should be a red flag to the bank.
That's true. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. That's a great observation too, because the mother did act like she was not familiar with using the PIN number or even the debit card, since she had given that to her daughter. But those are the types of things that we hope that, the banking fraud departments are looking at, when they're looking for exploitation and illegal activity on accounts. So, all right, let's move on to scenario 3. Which scenario 3, there are so many things going on in this scenario. It truly it's really difficult to watch. So in this scenario, we have the father is at home with his daughter and his grandson. And what we don't know is we don't know whose home that is. We don't know if that's his home and they're living with him, or if it's the mother's home or the daughter's home, I'm sorry, and the grandfather is living there. We don't really have enough information to kind of know, more of the details about what's going on. But what we can see is that, there's clearly neglect happening. So what are some other types of victimization? I kind of gave away one of the answers, but what are some of the other types of victimization that you see occurring in the third scenario? If you can please type those in the chat box.
This is the most severe form of abuse, drugging him to make him sleep. Neglect, his bedroom was a mess, dirty dishes on the bed, which I totally did not notice the first time I saw this video, but it's a great point. It's different than the rest of the house. Chemical restraint was another response. Lots going on here. The daughter went from telling dad he needed to take a pill to giving him 3. The dad thought he already took the medication. I'd be curious to know what the medication was and the potential side effects and overdose threat. He was taken to a dark, unkempt room to be left alone. Definitely neglect and isolation. And someone else mentioned emotional abuse isolation, which is a great point, even though she kind of sugarcoated it in the video. You know, she sounded nice and polite the whole time. She wasn't yelling.
Yeah, it's just I mean, it's a great scenario to watch if we're learning about neglect and elder abuse, but it's a very difficult scenario to watch when you think this is a person who's being treated this way. You know, I think as far as the victimizations in this scenario, definitely neglect. You know, his need for food isn't being met. His clothes are disheveled, so we don't really know if he has access to clean laundry or not. Regarding the over medicating, so that definitely could fall under physical abuse, because either, you know, over medicating or under medicating could have potential side effects that could cause harm and could cause physical harm. So that's definitely a concern. And it sounds like from the video that she's sedating him because she's trying to keep him isolated. And so there would be definitely the psychological abuse as well. But also, you know, I noticed when they go back to his bedroom, the closet doors are off the hinges. There's dirty dishes on the bed that has leftover food on it. His bed is not made. There's clothes everywhere. There's boxes. So there's definitely multiple falling hazards. So I would feel like his risk of injury is higher being in that room. And like someone pointed out in the chat box, the rest of the house looks beautiful and clean and organized, you know, and it's like they're keeping granddad in this storage room. So, you know, definitely a lot going on in this scenario. So, Michaelyn, what would APS have to say if this type of report came in? What would their response be?
I'll honestly say all three of them are bad, but I think this one probably bothered me the most in seeing it. What I would expect a maltreatment to be listed for this would be substance misuse because of the over medicating, and environmental hazards for probably inadequate food and other hazardous conditions. Because like you said, when I watched the second time, I noticed the dishes in the room looked a little not clean, but the second time I watched it, I noticed all the closets off the door and things like that as well, which could be a hazard to him. Especially if he's over medicated and he gets up in his woozy, you know, he could really hurt himself. Those right at face value is what I would see we would investigate. Of course, the investigator could go out there and possibly add the confinement, add inadequate supervision, because we need to really know his level of care that he needs, because they're just leaving him by himself in a room heavily medicated. So when an investigator would go out there to interview them, they would, you know, assess for capacity and hopefully, you know, he's okay and has capacity and can remember those things, take photographs, try to observe the medication, things of that nature. The only thing that's really tough with the substance misuse maltreatment is that it requires, for us to verify, it requires a medical opinion, which can be kind of tough because if the doctors aren't really, they're seeing him coming in clean or things like that, they may not have that information, what's going on in the home. That young man who witnessed would be very, very crucial with that. But talking to the doctor, taking pictures of the medication bottles, see if they're adding up to when he's taking them, how many he should take a day, and things like that would be a big help. So, and then of course, especially with the substance misuse, if we have findings, we always notify law enforcement and state attorney to see if there's anything that they are able to do criminally.
Absolutely. Thank you. That I think all of the scenarios, like you said, are difficult to watch, but the last one really is disturbing to think that someone is living in this manner. And my thought too is if this is his home and he's, you know, living in this room that's just in this terrible condition. So definitely a lot going on in this scenario.
Several people commented in the chat, I didn't want to miss this, that they were withholding nutrition also. And not only that, if he wasn't being fed and he was being given a lot of medication, that could cause some really bad outcomes on an empty stomach.
Too, because it looked like in their kitchen was orderly. They had different appliances tucked away. So it seemed like they probably had a functioning kitchen. We don't really know what was in the refrigerator or the cupboards, but when someone comes in and says they're hungry, you want to at least, it may not be dinner time, but you want to at least offer a snack or something. And the daughter just completely blew him off and was like, oh, you can wait, it'll be okay. And then like you were saying in the chat box, she gave him 3 pills. And, we don't know enough about that medication or what it was to know if he's supposed to have food in his system. So, definitely a lot of concerns going on in this scenario. Heather, what would prosecution's point of view be? What would the state attorney's office say about this case?
What we would definitely see that we have, depending on our witness testimony, depending on what maybe even the son would be willing to tell us was happening in the home, certainly the friend and possibly dad. I agree with everyone that we have obvious neglect. As far as you just look around that room, you can see neglect there, that he's not being fed, that there's clearly no food in the house, at least not to the extent that he can get to it because she has to stop on the way home. So we at least know there's nothing in the home necessarily that he can eat. I also think the over-medicating can and likely is also abuse. So it's not just neglect when you are putting someone, their physical or their psychological abuse. So if you, at least in the state of Florida, if you intentionally inflict physical or psychological injury on an elderly or disabled person, you are committing abuse on an elderly or disabled adult. So I think we definitely have both. And then anytime you have neglect, our hope is that our law enforcement partners will investigate exploitation. Because what often happens is, let's assume this is dad's house. We don't know, of course. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's his daughter's house and he's staying with her. But the reason that they're keeping him overly medicated, or in some scenarios under medicated, or the reason that they're not providing him with food or with just the normal comforts of life is often because they're getting some of his assistance or his retirement. Money tends to play a role as well in neglect, and certainly they don't have to go hand in hand. But what we'd be asking law enforcement to do is still be looking into those bank accounts, where the checks are going, who's on what account, is there a power of attorney? Because I think this last situation is a circumstance where we could likely have all three. And then, of course, if her over-medicating him, if her abuse or neglect turns into a loss of life, if we can show that he maybe overdoses or something along those lines, then, of course, we have in Florida manslaughter by neglect of a disabled or an elderly adult, which is not a common charge around the country. And it's something we don't want to have to use, but if she were to have given him so much that he overdoses, it would absolutely be a manslaughter charge.
Thank you. I appreciate you explaining all of that. And that's encouraging for me to hear in working with elder abuse prevention and awareness, that law enforcement could potentially explore and investigate other things that may be going on. Because I do feel like in many situations, there's more than one type of victimization occurring. So any other questions or comments about this scenario before we move on in the chat box?
Someone mentioned that the rest of the family looked well fed, so they're sure there's food in the house. It's just possible they weren't allowing him to access the food. And then someone else said, do we know whether the medication was prescribed to the father? So that's another good point.
That's a great point too, because we don't really know. I think we don't have, just from the video, we don't have enough information to have really a good full picture of all the things occurring. But thank goodness that friend is there and witnesses all of this and acts on, because you see him making the call at the end of the video. Thank goodness he acts on his instincts that something's just not right here and calls to make that report. So, again, I just want to emphasize how important it is to make that call and ask for help and report things if you see a situation occurring where an elder adult is being abused, or a vulnerable adult, or a child, any type of abuse. In Florida, we're mandated reporters. So just want to encourage everybody to, make that call so that an intervention can occur and hopefully services can be rendered. So, all right, as I said, I skipped to my next slide and told you this. Hopefully everyone already knows this, that in Florida, everyone is a mandated reporter for elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The Florida Abuse Hotline is 1-800-96-ABUSE. When you call the Florida Abuse Hotline to report elder abuse, you're going to press option 2. Option 1 is to report child abuse. You also have the option to report online at the Department of Children and Families website. And then I believe they also have email and fax capabilities as well. I didn't put all of those things on this slide, but I definitely wanted to make sure everyone had that 1-800-96-ABUSE number for reporting. In my work as project coordinator on the Abuse in Later Life grant, I have been very interested to find out that across the country, mandated reporting is not universal in all states. There are some states in the United States that are not mandated reporting states, and that kind of goes back to what Heather was saying about Florida, being very, progressive in making laws that protect seniors, but also, we have mandated reporting in our state. And so not all states have that. So I thought that was really interesting, that isn't and I think that's true for child abuse too. In some of those states, it's not mandated reporting. So I'm very thankful that we do live in a state where we're all mandated reporters. So I do want to let you know that after we've watched these terrible scenarios, that there is help available. So there's help from lots of different agencies. And I think the best case plan is when we all can kind of work together and let those services complement one another so that we really can provide wraparound care for seniors who have been victims of crime. So as I mentioned earlier, Elder Options is the local area agency on aging. So the state of Florida is broken into 11 planning and service areas. So Elder Options is planning and service area 3. We call ourselves PSA 3 for short. But pretty much no matter where you're joining us from across the state of Florida, you have a local area agency on aging who can provide services to seniors. Now, today's presentation is specifically about abuse, neglect, and exploitation, but I think it's also important to recognize that there are also other services available to senior adults, whether it be home delivered meals, in-home care, personal care assistance, if they need assistance with the Medicaid long-term care waiver. All of those things are supportive services even after someone has been a victim of abuse. And especially if there's been some sort of financial exploitation, they may need some extra assistance from the local area agency on aging. So Elder Options covers 16 counties. One of my grant programs is the Elder Abuse Prevention Program. And so we offer training, education and outreach, public service announcements across all 16 counties that we cover. And then also every one of those 11 planning and service areas has someone in my role who's an elder abuse prevention coordinator who can offer advocacy and referral services. So many times, all of our contact information is listed on the Department of Elder Affairs website for each planning and service area. So many times we'll get calls from victims, we'll get calls from families, needing help in their county. And so we do our very best whenever we get those calls to help connect those individuals with service providers in their specific county where they're at. So that's one of the benefits of doing outreach in all of those areas, is that hopefully, I'm able to be aware of what services are available, who the local DV center and SB center would be, who the local law enforcement agencies are, so that I can send those individuals for help in their local area. So Elder Options is also very fortunate to have a federal grant through the Office on Violence Against Women. We call this the End Abuse in Later Life Project. So this is a pilot project for us. This is the first time we've been awarded this grant, and it's a 3-year grant program, which I think is going to extend out a little bit because of COVID, because we're going to, request a little bit of an extension since we've had to, shut down some of our trainings and things like that during the pandemic. But we have this grant in partnership with Peaceful Paths, which is our local domestic violence center, with the Alachua County Sheriff's Office, and also the State Attorney's Office for the 8th Judicial Circuit, which is what Heather had mentioned earlier, is that they're one of our MOU partners on this grant. And through this grant in Alachua, Bradford, and Union counties, we're actually able to offer direct services for older adults who are 50 and older, who have been victims of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And we've actually partnered with Peaceful Paths to hire an abuse in later life advocate. So if I receive a referral or a call for Alachua, Bradford, and Union counties, I actually have a victim advocate who can work with them and is knowledgeable about our abuse in later life grant and the services available to help them kind of work through the process, whether there's a criminal justice case going on or they're going to civil court for an injunction. But the advocate can definitely kind of help navigate all of that. One of the other really important grant initiatives for this program is our Coordinated Community Response Team, our CCR team, and Adult Protective Services, the State Attorney's Office, all of our MOU partners, among many others, all get together monthly to meet and talk about elder abuse and talk about what services we have to serve older adults. And I would just encourage all of you, wherever you are in the state, maybe reach out to your local area agency on aging and see if there is some sort of multidisciplinary group that you can join, to help bring awareness to this issue. Some of the services we provide under the End Abuse in Later Life Project is, as I mentioned, we have the Abuse in Later Life Advocate. She's a full-time advocate that works, she's located at Elder Options and Peaceful Paths. We also have funding to help with legal assistance, with transportation, with housing assistance. So many times, if we think about the third scenario where the gentleman is living in that house and we don't know if that's his house or his daughter's house, if he needed to move so that he could be in a safe place, we have funding in these 3 counties where we can help with relocation or moving expenses. So we can help with like first month's rent or deposit to help get somebody out of the unsafe environment and into a safer environment for them. We've got some miscellaneous funding for pet boarding and then replacement items if things get broken during the incident of abuse. Many times survivors will not leave an abusive situation if they can't take their pet with them. And so it's really important with elder abuse and domestic violence to consider how important pets are to victims of abuse, because many times, if you're a pet owner, that's like your best friend. And so I would hate to think that any survivor stayed in an unsafe situation because they were concerned that they weren't going to be able to take their pet with them. So we definitely wanted to make sure and include that when we were planning services. So we have an A&E referral form, which stands for Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation. And this is, this is an Elder Options form. Obviously, you're not all within our Elder Options planning and service area, but check in with your local area agency on aging to see what processes they have in place to help older adults who are being abused. So we definitely have a lot of state resources. We have the Elder Helpline. This is the statewide Elder Helpline number. This is going to route you to your local area agency on aging. So when you call this, I believe it routes by area code. It will route you to Elder Source or Elder Options or, whichever agency is appropriate for your area. We have the Long-Term Care Ombudsman program, which helps with facility care. So they'll send out an advocate if there's an issue with care that a senior is receiving at a facility, and if there's, allegations of abuse or neglect in a facility setting. There's a statewide legal helpline, a Florida Elder Law risk detector tool. You can also file a complaint with the Office of the Attorney General. I put the link on here. And then you can go to the Department of Elder Affairs Elder Abuse Prevention page, and that's where you'll find there's a PDF of all 11 PSAs and the Elder Abuse Prevention Coordinator for each of those areas if you have questions about your local resources. I did upload a PDF of all of our slides that we've had today into the FeedLoop platform. And so if you want a copy of our PowerPoint presentation, feel free to download it. And then also you'll have all of our contact information and then also the resource information. So I want to take some time now. We've got about 9 minutes to take questions, especially for our panelists, or comments about the presentation or training.
Thank you to all of you for all that great information. I have a question for you, Kimberly. What if someone wants to report but doesn't know about the Elder Abuse Hotline or the Florida Abuse Hotline? Can they call 911 and it would be rerouted, or call their local law enforcement? How does that work?
So if you call 911, I'm not sure if it's automatically going to be rerouted. I think that they may bring up reporting to DCF Adult Protective Services. But typically you would want to do a separate report. So sometimes I'll have someone call and there has been a law enforcement report made, but Adult Protective Services was not notified. And so in that situation, I would talk to them about either them calling or us calling together, or, offering to call myself to report it so that, that situation can be reported. But I don't believe they reroute from 911 to Adult Protective Services. I do know that in some situations, law enforcement will also file a report to Adult Protective Services when they're investigating an abuse case.
I had a question. Is there a duty of a child to take an elder into their home if the elder lives alone and cannot take care of themselves?
That seems more like a legal question. Is that something, Heather, would you feel comfortable?
Sure, there's no duty that an adult child has to care for their aging parent. So obviously that would then often fall to the state. If someone were unable to care for themselves, then we may have some self-neglect, and we obviously need to go ahead and report that so that the state of Florida can step in and try to help that aging parent, but the child doesn't have to.
Thank you, Heather. I thought that was the case, but I didn't want to comment because I'm not an attorney. But I also think, and we mentioned self-neglect earlier in the presentation, I do want to make sure that everyone is aware that you can call Adult Protective Services when you suspect that self-neglect is occurring, because I know this presentation is focused on elder abuse and neglect and exploitation, but self-neglect is also a concern, and there may be services that Adult Protective Services can offer in situations where self-neglect is occurring. Michaelyn, did you want to share anything about self-neglect cases? I know we've discussed previously that Adult Protective Services can offer services, but if the individual has capacity, they have to agree to services, and sometimes that's not what happens.
Yes, and a large number of our cases are self-neglect cases, and sometimes I think they're probably the most difficult, because we do have to assess to make sure that the vulnerable adult has capacity. And of course, here in the great state of Florida, if they have capacity, they have the right to live how they want to live, even if it's not safe for them. And in some instances, we may visit the same vulnerable adult a few times before anything happens. And usually when something happens is they either finally agree to accept services, and or unfortunately their cognitive ability has decreased so severely that we then have to get involved and go to court. And we do, like I said, we do attempt to reach out to families. Sometimes I've had vulnerable adults tell me, I don't talk to my daughter, don't reach out to her. We try to respect that, especially if they're not giving us that information, but we do try to reach out to family to inquire to see if they want to get involved and assist. And if they don't, then that's when we do step in if they lack capacity to go to court. Otherwise, unfortunately, we just can only do what we can do, and we could give them information. If they don't want to accept our services, give them referrals to other agencies that may be able to assist them in the future if they change their mind.
And I think that's true of all victims of crime, because you can, if they have capacity, you can offer services, you can offer, a referral to the legal assistance agency, to the domestic violence agency, to the AAA for that area. And they still have, the right to self-determination and decide whether or not they accept those services. And that can be frustrating as providers to see that happening, to know that someone really needs help and is potentially in an unsafe situation, but they won't accept the help. And so that's, that's something I think we all have to deal with in our different silos that we're in during our work week. So any other questions?
We had a couple more questions. Does the abuse have to be at the hands of a caregiver or family member?
No, not at all. So it can be a neighbor, it could be a stranger, it could, perpetrators come in all shapes and sizes. So it could be anyone trying to, exploit or neglect or abuse an older adult. I think in the situation in my elder abuse prevention awareness training that I offer, we actually talk about the differences between financial exploitation as a form of elder abuse and scams. So I think sometimes the scams may not necessarily be elder abuse, especially if they're just being targeted at a wide range of people. But I think you can have perpetrators that are not caregivers and that are, not, family members as well for elder abuse cases.
For APS specifically, though, we do have to have a degree of relationship. So for our abuse maltreatments, the person can be a relative, household member, or caregiver to investigate our abuse maltreatments. For our neglect maltreatments, they have to be a caregiver. And of course, for exploitation, like I said, it doesn't necessarily matter. They have to be in a position of trust or confidence or know or have an idea that the person lacks capacity. So for APS, it is a little different. We do have to make sure we have jurisdiction to investigate, but that's just for us. And even if we received a case where maybe the person didn't meet the degree of relationship and we had to know jurisdiction in, we still are making those referrals out. So we still may contact law enforcement and the state attorney to let them know what's going on.
For criminal acts, neglect has to be a caregiver, but abuse can be anyone.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I was actually just about to say, would Michaelyn and Heather want to hop in there? So, because I know from the perspective of our abuse in later life grant, we look at all of the different victimizations and all of the different perpetrator relationships are covered for grant services. But I know that's different for APS and also for the state attorney's office. Any other questions?
I had one more question, which I can help answer. Where can I go to learn more about how capacity is determined in Florida? So I will tell you, join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock for our ethics session. He will be discussing capacity and competency. Do any of you have any other resources about capacity?
Well, for APS, of course, all of our investigators go through a pre-service training where we at length discuss capacity. We also, if we have an vulnerable adult that we go visit that we feel may have questionable capacity, and even if they don't have questionable, we're usually consulting with their physicians or neurologists, a doctor, to kind of see where they're at. We also have registered nurse specialists on staff. So if we do get those questionable capacity vulnerable adults and they don't have a doctor or they haven't been to their doctor, in years, we would have our registered nurse specialists go out with the client, with the investigator to assess their capacity.
That's awesome information. Thank you. I'll have to look for that ethics session tomorrow. That's great that we have that available. So any other questions today? It's 5 o'clock now, so I was worried we weren't going to fill our time. And here we are, almost running over. So
Such great information.
Well, I think we've had a great session. I really, really appreciate being invited to present for the Elder Justice Conference. And I'm so thankful for both Heather and Michaelyn for being willing to join my presentation and be panelists and help present today too. So thank you, thank you. And again, I do have some references for the different video link and things that I've used in my presentation, but those are on the conference webpage. But we also have all of our contact information as well. So if you download that PowerPoint PDF, you'll have all of the information that we've gone over today. And I'm always available, by email, by my work cell phone. If you have a situation you're working with an individual and you have questions about, feel free to call me and I'm happy to staff that situation with you. So just let us know how we can help.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of our panelists for taking time to be here today and for sharing all their expertise with us and for the hard work you do on behalf of older adults every day here in Florida. So thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you at 1 o'clock tomorrow.